Okay, good morning or afternoon, and welcome to our preview of CB Bank Analytics Strategic Forecast and What If application. My name is Jeff Rigsby, and I'm the President and CEO of CB Resource. I'll be doing our presentation this morning. First, I do want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. In our invitation, we said this demo is going to be about 15 minutes, so we'll keep to that. And certainly, if anybody has any questions, instant messaging is available on the GoToWebinar, and I'll try to field those as they come in. And then if anybody has a question that's a little more complex and takes a little more time, we'll probably do a follow-up call just in the interest of time. I also do want to acknowledge oops. Sorry, folks, a little technical difficulty on our side. I think we are good to go now. Great. My apologies for that. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the purpose of today's webinar is to highlight the features and benefits of our strategic forecast and what if application, and to provide a brief demonstration of how the app works and how you can use it. Interestingly enough, we do have folks on this call that are both existing members, and so for those of you members, I do want to let you know too, we've got another training scheduled that's going to be announced soon, and we also have some non-members that are just previewing the tool. So we do have two audience types with it, so I hope both groups find it of use. I mentioned, should you have any questions, just let me know. So what we're going to cover briefly this morning is we're going to, for those of you who aren't familiar with CB Bank Analytics, so I'll give you 2 seconds on what it is. But in today's demo, we really want to cover a few things, right? So we want to talk about creating and editing scenarios. We want to review certain applications or functional tabs, which includes the forecast tab, the value tab, the summary tab. We'll also talk about the export function and things of that nature. For those of you non-members, we'll also kind of close on price and just some closing thoughts on the program. For those of you who are not familiar with CB Bank Analytics, just a brief overview is CB Bank Analytics is a first-generation, highly interactive community industry intelligence system. We are positioning this as a member-based service. The system does have over 20 million bank records that are drawn from both the UBPR system as well as FDIC's call report data. And in addition to that, much like the strategic forecasting tool, there are proprietary applications designed to support our community bank members' ability to do risk management and planning. So with that, we are going to, I'll just run through a couple more slides and we'll jump into it. So if you were logged in, you would go, to start off, you would go to the strategic forecast icon. And I do want to mention this is a product or an application that's recently been launched. So it still is in beta version. And what that allows me to basically say is as you get on the system and start using it, if you may detect a bug or two, it is still a new launch. And please share those with us. And we'll talk about that as we go through it. But the strategic forecasting tool, it does allow you to run multiple high-level scenarios and really designed to look at various growth scenarios, earnings impact, looking at your capital ratios, looking at risk-based capital, looking at how you can drive shareholder value, because it does drill down to book value and market value equity, as well as dividend scenarios and things of that nature. I do want to stress that the long-term goal for this application is to move from a strategic planning application to a budgeting tool. But for the purposes and the way that the program is designed today, it's really there to provide you a very interactive platform that you can plug in multiple assumptions or scenarios, view what that scenario impact would be on your bank, and then compare multiple scenarios side by side to determine which one may be better than another in terms of your strategic pursuit. So I mentioned what we were going to do in the call. So once we log in, we're going to look at a couple of things, right? The first thing is how do we create or edit a scenario? So I'll start with that. And then once we get into creating the scenarios, There are 3 tabs. One is forecast, one is value, and one is summary. And we'll demonstrate how you can utilize each one of those report functions to support your planning activity. And so with that said, and in the interest of time, let's go to our demo. And this is our login page for those of you not familiar with it. So we will log in. And by the way, I know we have a couple of folks that I've talked to, some of our members, as far as how this tool runs. So you will have an opportunity to see different scenarios we discussed once we drop into it. So again, for those of you not familiar with our platform, this is our login page. This is where you would access our apps. And we're going to go ahead and click on the Strategic Forecast application. And I am going to do one thing really quickly here. There we go. And this is general high-level stuff, but let's go ahead and click on the forecasting tool. And so I mentioned, first of all, once you're in here, and you can kind of see the navigation of it, right? So you're able to create or edit scenarios. You're able to look at the viewed scenarios. So for example, if I click on this, these are all my various scenarios that I have. And this is the icon. So if I want to build my assumptions, this is where you go in. Think of it like a wizard and just plug in your basic assumptions, whether it's growth related, whether it's net income or an ROAA figure, whether you're looking at dividends. You do need to, in order to maximize the value of the tool, you do need to plug in your actual outstanding shares. And so in that regard, you would just plug that into this field. If you want to model new capital, you can plug in what the new capital amount is, what the price is per share. Also, if you want to drop in that you're going to acquire something, or if you need to adjust anything related to Common Equity Tier 1, your Tier 1 capital, or Tier 2 capital, you can do that here. What this system automatically does do is it looks back at your most recent full year of reporting and then also drops in the most recent quarter. So there's a launching off point. And what the program is doing is it's assuming certain baselines to develop forward ratios. So it does need a launching point. So it does pre-populate your existing financial performance in the most recent quarter and the previous full year. So just to give you an idea of just how simple this could be, you can, basically come up with a name of whatever you want the name to be, scenario X. And let's just say in this scenario, you want to grow, 7%. And of course, you can do the same thing, for whatever the period is. You can forecast out to 5 full years, or you can make some modifications to it if you want it to stagger out overly. But you're going to plug in what you're going to finish the current year in, which is 2016. That's where we are today. And then also plug in your next 5. Now, if you don't want to use the full 5 years, that's certainly your option. When you're looking at forecasting your income, you can either do it in whole dollars, or again, you can take an approach of just plugging in an ROA number. And if you want it to be kind of progressive, you can plug in different levels over time, either show progressive improvement or whatever it is you're seeking to model, right? But again, very simple in terms of plugging in your assumptions. If you're a dividend-paying bank, you can certainly do that. You do need to put zeros in dividends, and I'll just warn you, this is a beta product, so there might be little things that seem a little clunky. But the other thing in terms of determining what your dividends might be, it does come down to using a negative. In a negative, and in your call report, you report dividends as a percentage of net income. So in this case, if you want to pay a 20% dividend, you would literally just go ahead and plug in 20, and then just, if you want to hold it constant, you can do that. If you want to change it year over year, you can do that. Or you can put in a percentage rate. Oh, I see what I just did. I didn't want to do that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to put the percentage. That one is if you wanted to do whole dollars. So we'll go ahead and drop that in. And shares outstanding, let's just make it something simple so we can And so there's the number of shares outstanding. And let's just say those are the only assumptions I really want to run, and I want to take a look at those. So we've called it Scenario X. We're going to save those changes, and now it's populated the model. So let's go ahead, and first of all, I want to point out that anytime you want to review the model, you can simply hit download, and it will drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, and you can do some additional modeling or create some charts and graphs or things of that nature. But they're all exportable and very easy. But in a nutshell, what we now have is a 5-year overview of what the bank's net income will be. In this case, we showed dividends, so there's the dividend payment and the dividend rate, as well as we made no bank equity comment in there. But then it actually shows you what your common equity Tier 1 would be, what your Tier 1 adjustment is if necessary, Tier 1 capital, Tier 2 capital, total risk-based capital, risk-weighted assets, and total assets. So you can kind of progressively see where the plan is going to take you. And what's nice, in addition to illustrating what asset growth and ROA and ROE that you plug, you can just click on the equity analysis, and it does show you what your market value equity would be based on a 1.5 times book. It shows you what your current share calculation is, what your book value per share is, what your market value per share is based on that analysis, what your earnings per share, earnings on a multiple of 15 times book, 20 times book, and what the dividend would be as a payment basis. So it's all summarized for you in the worksheet. And again, that could be exported. Kind of the fun thing about having this available to you is you could actually be sitting in a team meeting, a management team meeting, or even a board meeting and run various scenarios. Once you've plugged the scenario in, and if you want to determine, well, what does that do to the value of the bank over time, you can click on the Value tab and take a look at it from that perspective, right? So there's our net income, there's dividends if dividends are being paid, and then we've got bank equity capital, and then it runs into what your asset growth has been, your ROA, your ROE in each one of those years, total number of outstanding shares, and then the incremental value movement based on about a quarter of 25 basis points. So it shows you what your book value equity would be at 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, 2, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, or 3 times book. Again, it's exportable, and to the extent you're saying, what if we execute this plan effectively, what would our performance look like under any one of these scenarios in any given year of the plan? And you can look at that on a per scenario basis. Now, one of the nice benefits of this as a tool goes, you can click on the Summary tab, which allows you to build multiple scenarios and compare them side by side. And for this presentation, let's just say we have Scenario 1, which is what we'll call our 10% growth scenario. We have Scenario 2, which is 5%. We have Scenario 3, which is 10% growth, but we're going to also pay a 10% dividend. Scenario 4 is I'm going to grow 10%, but I am going to authorize a $6 million stock repurchase program because we've got some excess capital and we want to take care of that. Scenario 5 is I acquire a bank. So these are all obviously fictitious scenarios, but just to allow you to see, then you can say, based on what year, how is the plan progressing? So let's just say for purposes of this discussion, we want to see fully phased in 5 years out, what does the bank look like? So off of that base rate in its 5th year, it will give you what your total assets would be in that 5th year, for example. It will give you what your average growth rate is per year over that period of time. It will let you know what your net income would be in each one of these scenarios over time. It will see what your Tier 1 risk-based capital as well as your total capital ratios look like. And this is kind of key. If you look at a quantum growth strategy, for example, this will allow you to see how far you can push your equity without having to raise new capital. So that would be one scenario you can build in, just fully leveraged, and this quickly tells you what that looks like. From that point, additionally, for comparison purposes, you get book value equity. You get a standard plug of market value equity at 1.5 times book. You get a book value per share. You get a exit scenario at 1.5 times book. at 15 times earnings, 20 times earnings. It gives you that dividend per share cost and what your total outstanding shares are. So if someone were to look at this and you're just saying, gee, where do I get my most bang for the buck? Under scenario 3, I end up having the best, well, let's see if I do or not. Scenario 4 would give me my best book value per share. That would mean I'm not going to pay a dividend. I'm going to grow at 10%, but I am going to do a one-time stock repurchase of $6 million. So what that did is it pulled the shares down by about 400,000 shares. It elevated my book value per share because I have fewer shares, but it does provide that higher return to those shareholders that come in. But in short, what this tool really allows you to do is just take a look at some different scenarios, and if book value equity is a key consideration, if earnings per share is a driver, if an average growth rate or total assets is a driver, again, this is all about strategic assumptions of, where we want to get to and how much. And if you can kind of model where you think you need to go, it allows you to go back, develop your strategic priorities, and start putting together the plan that can help you achieve that targeted objective. But being able to look at it side by side is always helpful and actually draw your own conclusions. And to the extent you want to either chart something or you want to highlight something so it's a little easier to read, just drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, and that enables you to kind of go in and look at your scenarios, highlight them, create some charts or graphs, but it clearly illustrates each of your scenarios, and it will title them as far as whatever title you put into it. So again, very useful, perfect for a strategic workshop or a strategic planning session, either at the management or board level, and allows you to kind of book multiple scenarios. And again, kind of going back, just to recap on the forecast model, you can go into view existing scenarios, and for example, if you wanted to see specifically what that stock repurchase agreement would look like, and you looked at bank, at the impact, there's the adjustment of $6 million to the bank, and there's the adjustment if you go down into equity analysis, where we went from X number of shares to Y number of shares. So you can drop any one of the scenarios and look at it in detail, and if you want to tweak it, just go back and hit create or edit the scenario and modify your assumptions. I do want to caution you when you do change your assumptions, if you're going to do a new one, rather than saving over a pre-existing one, I would suggest you would go to view your existing and create a new scenario. That way you're creating an absolute new one. So with that, just in kind of a recap, there's two primary functions here. There's the scenario creation function and then the report generation. So you can create scenarios, view those scenarios over up to a 5-year horizon. You can look at it from a forecast standpoint. You can look at it at value creation standpoint, looking at multiple exit value considerations if that's something you're interested in. Or you can look at it a side-by-side multiple scenario perspective. In any case, again, high-level assumptions, but really this is what drives our decisions in a lot of cases, particularly at the board level. If you just want to say, if we grow by this amount, we get our earnings to X, and we do this, this is what's desirable as a financial performance outcome. So with that, I'm going to take us back to our presentation and just kind of wrap things up. For those of you who aren't familiar with CV Analytics, again, we're adding a growing number of tools and applications, and this is our dashboard where the applications are available. If you're not a member and you're interested in what the pricing is, if you're under $250 million in assets, it's just under $1,000 a year. That's for unlimited users, unlimited custom peer groups, training programs, and special pricing on our products. And you can see the pricing at the asset levels are extremely affordable, and one we think will create great value for your bank. So lastly, for those of you who are members, thank you for taking time to get a quick preview. We did want to just give a quick overview of what the application does. We certainly encourage you to do one of two things. There is an open enrollment coming up in December that's going to be a much deeper dive and training program on our 3 or 4 most sophisticated applications. We do encourage you, if you need it, to schedule a one-on-one training session with us. We're here for you. We are also forming user groups for feedback, so if you haven't joined a user group, we certainly want to encourage you to do that. And, you know, this tool gets better and better with the feedback we get from our members. So use it, let us know what's going on, and you'll be amazed at how quickly things get implemented or updated. And then lastly, for those of you who are non-members, we certainly hope you'll schedule a full demo of the platform. And most importantly, we'd love to have you become a member. So with that, I know that was very quick, and I still ran over 15 minutes, but I did want to give you guys a sense of the ease of navigation, the flexibility at high-level planning, and how it can be used either as an independent tool for your own analytical purposes or as a team tool where you're projecting up on a screen working with your management team or board. So with that said, thank you all very much for carving time out of your busy schedule to take a sneak preview of our strategic planning and what-if model. Again, I encourage any of you to contact me directly if you'd like to have a full training program where we'll actually pull your bank up, model your bank, and really do a deeper dive on the use of the tool. So with that, the clock on the wall says it's 10:21 Pacific Standard Time. So thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to interacting with all of you in the very near future. Thank you.